Greetings. Welcome to the Neomark Show. In this first show of the NM platform, my job as the host and founder of this platform is to give you the truths and the insights of the key issues that are messing up the nation of South Africa. We have been in so many issues that complicate our daily lives, of our kids, of our futures, and our forebears. So today, the issue that I'm going to delve you into and give you the full evidence of it and the proof of this issue and certain matter that is very, very, very important for all of you to know is deindustrialization. Deindustrialization is a process in which by all the jobs in a manufacturing sector like heavy industry, like steel, light industry, production of services, like to put it into context, like made in South African goods. Made in South African goods, I mean like building cars, manufacturing steel beams for exports, everything that just has productive output to the economy and to the people at home, not a service economy. So firstly, we're going to delve into, I have topics right here, sorry guys. We're going to talk about like the industrial policy of 1994. So ever since policies adopted during the apartheid era, they have played a significant role in distorting South Africa's economy, particularly because they provided direct and indirect state support to various heavy and strategic industries. After 1994, the industrial policy pursued several corrective objectives. In order to increase the country's international competitiveness by the early 1990s, some trade liberalization, like opening all foundations, like opening free trade to markets, to access markets. Remember, during this period of the 1990s, South Africa was heavily sanctioned, and due to the apartheid regime, it was sanctioned. So they had to make some concessions into evolving into this democracy that me and you, the people of this country, have free speech in. So this included a reduction of quantitative controls on imports. Like all restrictionist policies since 1994, as they were done by the ANC government, they have been removed to increase economic beneficially in a fiscal policy of the service economy. So which means they indirectly, I'm not saying directly, allegedly, prioritized foreign goods coming into the country and the export of them. But now they wanted to make it into a resource colony. So let me just delve into this and let's not get way ahead of ourselves and too political. So this liberalization process accelerated after 1994. Average tariffs declined from 28% in 1990 to 23% in 1994. So like about 5% reduction. And 12 years after democracy came into this southern part of Africa, the tariffs decreased down to 8% by 2006. You understand that? So basically, before 1994, South African liberalization had some tariffs which benefited the local producers of the economy. You understand that? So they created more jobs, and businesses used to have access and credit lines to low productive loans to them and their sectors. So generally, there was a shortage of industrial policy, inventions, and new programs. However, the net impact is far from clear. So ever since this happened, there have been many issues that have plagued this nation, like unemployment, and the poverty rate has never changed. So the capital intensity, the manufacturing sector has been relative, like capital intensive, and has increased over time. So during the 1994 period till now, what exactly happened is that the beneficial economy for our people in this nation was kind of like sold out to foreign investors and people who just like to line their pockets for bigger profits, and that's what they all know. So the share of capital intensive sectors in the manufacturing exports of the country, because we know like manufacturing applies like many jobs for people. So that's why we have high unemployment rate, because productive sectors, which is like manufacturing, heavy industries, mining jobs, transportation, reservicement, and modernization programs, they have never been implemented. So this just showcases that, first, the heavy industry has benefited enormously from substantial direct and indirect state support, including cheap coal-based energy. Secondly, the monopoly of large upstream producers, intermediate products in sectors such as steel and chemicals has profoundly disadvantaged more labor-intensive production. So, if we want a growing economy, the key issue here is that we cannot allow for state firms to monopolize their industries and service centers, because in this hierarchy of structure of the economy, we have like small guys like this, like that guy that just wants to start a foundation and have a business. And so these big, large firms, they gobble up all the contracts, all the export rights, the regulations, lobbyists. So this, it creates a stagnant, productive, and innovative center within the economy of the manufacturing side, which produces much more jobs for you all. So these things, they've created many issues for people in this country. So since the tariffs from the 1990s, like mainly 1994 and 1995, the industrial trade policy, the manufacturing sector has performed poorly in terms of its contribution to the economy. So at least until quite recently, with many policies have intended to push manufacturing onto a more capital intensive trajectory, which has not been working quite well, because if that capital was not injected responsibly and had auditors and councils to prevent corruption in those sectors, me and you will have never been having this conversation. So you understand. And the problem right here is that these people, these cronies, these elites, they benefit from the South Africa deindustrialization and its current collapse that we're currently seeing with our eyes, like power structures like Eskom, rainwater falling, and many sectors, retrenchments from companies. So my job here is to give you the key issues and the insights of who are the benefiters and who benefits from this detriment of our nation's economy collapsing. So, as I have here we have the manufacturing of national GDP in 1980, the quarter one. So that's like maybe 14 years before apartheid ended. So we had the manufacturing share of national GDP at 17%. 17% of GDP, imagine. And when we had like 10 years later, in the 1990s, it kind of reduced to 15%, which is like 2%. And in 1994, it was around 13%. And in 2010, it decreased to 13%. And currently now is about 12%. So from 17 to 12% over a span of 15 years. So this graph right here, I wonder if you can see this one, yeah? The manufacturing versus the rest of the economy. This showcases that since the start of the 1994 quarter one, the manufacturing and the rest of the economy were like this. They were in sync. And we all know that manufacturing is the real economy, not a fake economy of services and financial speculation and all this stuff. So since 1994, the manufacturing share of national GDP was still around in sync with the rest of the economy. Then we fast forward to about 2004, and we saw it's about collapse. There was a slight downturn right here. Then we head to 2009. It was still in sync. So this is like 1 year after the banking financial crisis of the United States, which affected the global economy. Then you see a downturn, a sharp sink, and some recovery. And ever since 2010 and 2009, from that period, we can see here clearly that the manufacturing GDP of the economy and the rest of the economy were a bit starting to widen apart. They were starting to widen apart, and they were started like, not merging against, like as we started in 1994, they were starting to be apart. And this is where the key issues and detriment came down. And as we see here in 2019, due to COVID, it collapsed, and it hasn't recovered very well since then. So I have it all here, guys. I have it all here. So ever since, this showcases that the real economy and the manufacturing industrial complex has been a key adaptation, like a key link, a key tool, like a key tool into making people work and manufacturing and people to have jobs in any sectors. Like I'll give you an example. Like you see now, e-score at one point in 1994, during the 1990s till 1994, e-score's employment rate was around like 24,000 workers in one firm plantation. Like in one firm, like imagine, like in an area of 4 rugby fields, there was, no, I'm tripping. Let's say 12 rugby fields, there was 24,000 workers in a firm. And ever since that period, from 1994 till 2004, about 2,000 people retrenched. So it's mildly, but that's not good. 2,000 people, those people have families to feed. So ever since, 1994, in a span of 10 years till 2004, 2,000 people were retrenched. And from 2004 to last year, 2024, about 15,000 people were retrenched. They were kicked out of their jobs. Because you know why? We didn't have tariffs. We didn't have protectionist policies. We didn't have a government that was very efficient enough to protect the interest and national interest of the people of this republic. You understand that? You understand that, right? So, ever since those 1990s policies of liberalization, like, oh, we're going to go to democracy, we're going to democratize. No, that hasn't worked. That hasn't worked. Democracy only benefits the people who have had the wealth before this economic and political ideology stepped in of trade liberalization, free markets, global economy, globalization. These things have ripped the roots at the core of this economy, which was the manufacturing industrial complex. Even now as we speak, the Vile Triangle, there's firms, there's like ghost firms, like it's the same thing that's happening in Detroit, like the Rust Belt of Detroit, where it was known as an automotive manufacturing powerhouse. So Americans, they have basically shifted that to China for like low, cheap labor. But at the end of the day, those normal folks in the 70s and 80s they didn't get a payout for that. The only people that get payout for this is these business owners and the elites and the CEOs who owned these manufacturing industrial complex. So they off-based, like they off-shipped their companies and the productive economy to another nation, which is now a second superpower that's going to challenge the United States in the future. I forbid that, but that's what's going to happen. So once a country or a person or a government structure starts to fall into the traps of false pretense ideas that have not been tested, this becomes a detriment to the national economy and interest. You understand that? So, as I told you, like 15,000 people have been retrenched from Iscore company, and that was that contributed to like 25% of the national manufacturing, whole GDP within the manufacturing sector. I mean, even estimates, they put it at around like maybe 800,000 people since 1994 have lost their jobs. Till today, they keep losing jobs and getting retrenched. While the top elites and the billionaires and, people that hang out with the ANC cronies, the government structure cronies, sorry about that, the government structure cronies, they get all this money and all these resources that we want. Not that we want them, I'm sorry about that. Not that we want them, but resources that were supposed to be in the people's hands, as us South Africans. Wages have not increased, there's high inflation, the cost of living is very too high these days. So deindustrialization is a major factor for you not getting to afford to take out your kids to long-term vacations anymore or going to visit your long-term family, because the elites have the foot on your neck. And as the interest rates rise and all of this financial chaos and all these firms closing down, it comes at a cost of us hardworking South Africans who have fought for a better future. But I must say, the future kind of looks bleak right now. And I know all of you right here know that too. So I'm going to show you a trade deficit chart between us and China. Between the era of like 1996 and 2006, our major trading partner was the United States. But ever since the 2000s and when China entered the World Trade Organization, they have flooded the economy with imported goods that combat our national production facilities. Like the local people that produce goods for South Africans, they have been flooded by this cheap goods made in another nation in East Asia right there, a superpower, which is China. So I'm going to show you a graph right here. So I hope you can see this, guys. So this is a chart. So South Africa's trade deficit with China is growing. SA imports is marked in blue. SA exports to China is marked in green, and balance of trade. Let me see this. So since 1988, our SA imports from China were around at least $100 million. It was $100 million, which is around like which is around like 1.8 billion rands in today's amount. So they were very, very key in sync, as you see here. Our imports from China during those times, in the late 80s and early 1990s, was around $100 million, which was very good. It's not a very bad budget deficit. And then we're going to fast forward 20 years later. So as you saw there, here as we go to the SA imports from China, in 2008, they are around like $10 billion. $10 billion, that's like around 100 to 210 billion rands we are importing from China. So you understand that we are not selling things, we are buying things. So we are becoming a consumerist economy and flooding the whole country with cheap goods to sell for profits to our fellow countrymen, which we bought from another nation. They get more nation because their own people, they produce the stuff. So this was the final nail in the head of the productive economy of your average working South African. This was the nail in the head. You understand that? So as this issue came upon, it was a key very much problem. Like $10 billion, that's like 200 billion rands. Like imagine. Imagine, bro. This is what created the detriment of our economy. I'm sorry. This is what created the detriment of our economy. And it does not get only better, it gets even worse. As you can see here, as of latest data from OTCN, it says SA imports from China is $22.4 billion. And you see the SA exports to China have been have been a wider gap, like a trade deficit between us and China. And SA imports between China and exports to South Africa have been $22.4 billion, which is around 400 to 500 billion rands with the B. You understand what's happening here? So during these times, we have been lobbied by foreign nations, including China, some other European and East Asian and South Asian nations. Our government and political parties have been lobbied by some of these nations. When I talk about lobbying is like a form of, like, let me just say this. I want to buy somebody now. Let me just say, I'm gonna take for example, I want to let's say James is a representative of a party in the parliament, and his position is very credentialed and can serve my interests. So I'm the lobbyist. So I give James around at least, let's say, 20 million rands, and he passes policies that benefit my company and my own interests, not the people's. So that's what also created deindustrialization, was the process of lobbying. Lobbying is like a form of bribery, but in a legal way. You understand that? I know these are all big words, guys. Like I'm really sorry about this, but lobbying is a formal way and process of bribery. Bribery is illegal, but lobbying is a counterpart and it's legal. You understand that? It's to serve business interests from bureaucrats. So ever since then, we've imported around, like, since the late 90s, no, the late 80s, we have imported around $100 million, which is like 1.8 billion rands. Imagine 1.8 billion rands in the late 90s, and then in the late 2000s, it ballooned to 180 billion rands. Like imagine, that's 100 times X. You understand that? That's 100 times X. Like from 1.8 billion rands to 180 billion rands of us importing Chinese goods and flooding the market with cheap goods. This is what's closing companies and stores, because the Chinese are infiltrating in this nation. And I won't say it's Chinese. I won't say it's Chinese only, but there's many other nations which I'll get into later in this video. So imports have flooded the domestic market economy, taking up more than 35% of local steel demand, while freight services deteriorated to its lowest levels ever, resulting in significant operating risk, the steelmaker statement said. ArcelorMittal South Africa, ArcelorMittal, which was known as ISCOR, expects to report a headline loss of a share between 89 cents per rand and 99 cents a rand, to a total of 0.24 rands for the 6 months to June, narrowing its loss from 1 rand per share during the same period last year. So the productive shares of ISCOR, the largest steel maker of the manufacturing industrial complex of South Africa, has fallen from 99 cents to about 60 cents. That shows you the company is really in bad waters. The company is really in bad waters, guys. So, as now we're gonna go into the main benefits of this deindustrialization of this nation. So, during this process of the deindustrialization of this nation, in South Africa, the combined wealth of 6 billionaires increased by $4.1 billion in 2024, or around $11 million per day. $11 million per day. That's around like 180 million rands. Or let's say now to the exchange rate, maybe it's 200 million rands per day. Sorry for my eyes, but you understand, man? Like 200 million rands per day has increased for these financial crony elites, these plutocrats, the oligarchs. Their nation, their total wealth now amounts to $29.4 billion. $29.4 billion. That's around like 5% to 8% of the national GDP of South Africa. Like, you understand that? That's almost close to a quarter of the GDP of the nation. You understand? It's just really crazy. So, in this article, as it states, that one that I've read from right here, domestically, the political economic elite has also benefited. The collapse of labor-intensive industry and the rise of finance and retail wealth has disproportionately enriched those with capital, political connections under apartheid, and continuing today, a handful of oligarch conglomerates and business families dominate. Post-1994, BEE empowerment deals created a new class of wealthy insiders. So you understand what it says there? So during the collapse of what made the unemployment rate of South Africans much lower than it is today, during the collapse of the manufacturing industrial complex, like labor-intensive industry in other terms, a few conglomerate oligarchs and business families still dominate today. Their wealth has grown while the average South African has fallen, decreased. So, post-1994 black economic power deals, they created new wealthy insiders, prominent entrepreneurs, ANC cronies, and former union leaders who acquired assets in mining, banking, and larger retailer chains. For instance, mining magnates like PM, Patrice Motsepe, Christophe Wiese, banker Michel Leroux, and media baron Mr. Rupert Johann have seen their fortunes. These guys have seen, these are the people that benefited mainly, have seen their fortunes soar even as manufacturing jobs vanished. So these guys' wealth, these oligarchs, the ones that I just mentioned their names right now, their wealth has increased as manufacturing jobs have vanished. And don't tell me about the service economy is growing. Oh, it's a much bigger GDP. Like that doesn't work no more, guys. So the real economy, as I stated earlier in this video, is a productive manufacturing economy. So an Oxfam reports notes South Africa's 6 richest billionaires increased their combined wealth by $4.1 billion, as I mentioned today, which is around like 80 to 100 billion rands. These individuals span industries like mining, luxury goods, retail, and technology, sectors that have grown despite deindustrialization. So the service economy has grown, but not the productive real economy has not grown. It has been collapsing in real time. So the objectives of this deindustrialization program is to enrich elites by making quick cash and quick bets in the market, in the stocks, in the venture capitalists, in the hedge funds, in these institutions, in the JSE, in the stock market, in the speculative economy, which doesn't benefit us, the real South Africans. So as the real economy that protects South Africans and helps us put food on the table has collapsed, these elites' money supply has increased. Nations benefiting from South Africa's industrialization. Nations that are benefiting from South Africa's industrialization is India. India automated pharmaceuticals. India is now leading exporters of cars and pharmaceuticals and textiles and chemicals to South Africa. Goods that we used to make but now can't make because now we're importing them. Example, Indian automakers like Tata Motors and Mahindra supply vehicles and parts that once could have been produced domestically. So we have to import more. We used to produce parts to fix these vehicles that we imported, like Toyotas and Tata Motors and Mahindras, but now we have to import the parts from another nation, which increases the cost of living in this nation, and it bankrupts our national economy and increases the budget deficit. Pharmaceuticals. India's generic drug manufacturers supply most of SA low-cost medicines, undercutting local chemical and medical production. Like all these companies that produce medicines, they cut in too. So other countries like Germany with cars, the 3 German motors, and UK in financial services, retail, money, equipment, and processed goods. United States and GM before aircraft parts and agricultural manufacturing and IT systems, fast food retail chains, and AGOA too, they benefit from South Africa's collapse in manufacturing sector. AGOA is basically like the African Growing and Opportunity Act, which Trump is going to kick us out of soon. The US benefits from cheap South African raw material exports while supplying high-value manufactured goods back. Like, imagine, they're taking raw materials, like things that we mine out of the ground that we don't, refine, like our gold, like, we just give them to that and they sell it back to us. And I'm sure in the societal conscious hierarchy, many people know this. So Japan and South Korea too benefit from the deindustrialization of South Africa. Toyota is the largest vehicle brand in South Africa. Electronic appliances, Samsung, LG, Sony, they supply electronics. South Korea captured the consumer electronics market and mobile market, sidelining any chances of domestic assembly industries. Like even now, we don't have tariff protectionist policies and subsidies, which these nations that benefit from selling South Africa, we have not put protectionist policies that protect our domestic industries. Like make these companies produce the things here. Even like China, like produce the things within South African borders and employ South Africans. Which is going to benefit us very hugely. But no, we don't have tariffs. We are in the false pretense idea of free trade without restrictions. Also, neighboring African states that benefit to the detriment of the manufacturing industrial complex of South Africa is the SACU, South African customs unions, these smaller states export cheap textiles, clothing, sugar, and basic goods to South Africa. Eswatini, Lesotho governments, factories may be or many owned. So you see, via proxies, the SACU is like neighboring nations that sell goods to South Africa. Swaziland and Lesotho government factories are mainly owned by Taiwanese and Chinese investors and export duty-free to South Africa, filling the vacuum after SA's textile collapse. Like, despite we might have restrictions on Taiwanese and Chinese firms and all these other nations that I mentioned that are benefiting from the deindustrialization of South Africa, they go and set up factories in neighboring nations where we import their goods without any charges, without any taxes, just free. They can come in as the same prices that they sold us to, so we can sell in South Africa. But these other nations, they've seen a linchpin. They've seen an opportunity to, step under the bridge, step under the roots, under the ground of the former structure, and flood the economy with much of their cheaper goods, which benefits them via proxy of these two nations, Eswatini and Lesotho, and which ultimately benefits their Chinese and Taiwanese owners. So who gains the most? Who gains the most from this deindustrialization process? Germany and Japan and the US, India and China, regional neighbors like the SACU that I mentioned, and the EU overall has been one of the biggest net beneficiaries of South Africa's deindustrialization after China. In short, as I say, China may be the headline winner, but Germany, India, Japan, Korea, the US, and regional SACU states all profit from South Africa's hollowed out manufacturing base. So you understand now who really benefits from us suffering. Domestic and foreign. Domestically, so I won't blame other nations like China or whatsoever, but I'll blame the folks that are within this nation. The folks that normal magogos and people and our grandparents and they vote for. So these people, they're selling out our nation to foreign investors and domestic oligarchs and plutocrats who still benefit from the collapse of this economy via bribing the three biggest parties, the ANC, the DAs, and the EFFs. You understand that? So this is the playground of them benefiting to the detriment of the South African economy. And I'm sorry, to this matter, we do have solutions to this. And it's the enlightenment and awakening of the common folk, which is what I'm doing here, which is my part to play here. So I've given you the basic beneficiaries of this collapsing country, which future looks bleak. And these leads don't know what to do with it right now. So anyways, guys, I'm glad for you to watch this show today. First episode of Neo Mark Show. I'm really sorry about getting too controversial into the statements and the articles, and this is still one of the first few crude episodes. This is a prototype episode, but I've delved it and we have done pretty well. So I thank you for joining here. Hit the subscribe button and like and comment and give me your opinions about what I've just said in this video. And see you next time. Catch you later. Goodbye.